My name is Christie Bates, and I'm an intellectual property lawyer at Bereskin and Parr, an IP boutique in Toronto, and I'm a member of Building Transformation's project delivery and risk management think tank. We've got a great panel lined up for us today. We've got CTOs, VPs of operation, and leaders of digital innovation at their respective firms. But before we get into introductions, I want to give you a roadmap of the discussion today on the challenges facing the AECO industry. So as you'll hear, there are a lot of them, and frankly, in 40 minutes, we'll just be skimming the surface. And we've therefore decided to try and focus on three main topics. First of all, as Tornado Alley seems to be moving our way towards Ontario and Quebec, we thought it would be very timely to tackle some of the challenges that arise with the growing need to emphasize sustainability in the face of climate change. Next up, we're delving into digital transformation, i.e. integration of digital technologies in the design and build process. We'll be touching upon issues such as digital twins and leveraging AI, amongst other topics. Lastly, we're specifically looking at how BIM, AI, and other data-heavy and collaborative tech is creating both ethical and legal challenges surrounding data ownership and data sharing. Now, although we're focused on the challenges, it's worth emphasizing that we're seeing wonderful opportunities for innovation and advancement that, frankly, are going to make all of our lives a lot easier. But sometimes there's so many moving parts that we're losing the chance to sit back and ask the hard questions. The goal of today's session is to prompt reflection on the challenges that lie ahead. This way, you'll be better equipped to move forward strategically with a view of the long-term obstacles that we're likely going to face. So without further ado, we will start off the introductions for each of the speakers.
I'm Krigh Bachmann, leader of digital innovation at DIALOG, a multidisciplinary design practice based across Canada. Within the practice, as leader of digital innovation, odd kind of title, I'm somebody who focuses on researching and implementing new technologies, so trying to keep the practice on the cutting edge and keeping us in technology integration into our projects as well.
I'm Brent, Mauti, Chief Technology Officer at Turner Fleischer Architects. We're an architecture studio here in Toronto, interior designs, experiential graphic design, or wayfinding as well. And we have a multitude of project types that we cover. Building information modeling is our approach for most. And I've had experience realizing digital twinning, which we'll talk about in the second question.
Great, thanks. Hi, I'm James Vandezande. I'm an architect and Chief Technology Officer at HOK Architects. We're a global architecture and planning firm. We actually have 3 offices in Canada, in Toronto, Calgary, and Ottawa. Myself, I'm based out of New York, so I'm happy to be here. I have served in leadership roles in various industry-based groups throughout the years. I've chaired BIM Forum in the US for several years. I've been still engaged with Building Smart International. I recently took up a post as one of the co-chairs of the Innovation and Best Practices Council for the New York Building Congress. So really excited to be part of this panel today.
Very good. Nibras Yacoub. I am the Vice President of Operations for NORR Architects and Engineers in Toronto and actually North America wide in the UK. My role is a little bit interesting in fact that my background is architecture, but I've been involved in the business of architecture for about the last 15 years on the operations side. So my interest peaked when this forum came up. It's not only about challenging facing the challenges of design industry, but it's also facing the challenges of the business of our design industry. So that's interesting, an interest of mine definitely, and something that I would like to give a little bit of perspective on and go from there.
So with that, we'll jump right into it. I will ask that as a housekeeping matter, that questions be held until the end, so that way we make sure we cover all the topics today. So the first thing, as noted, that we'll be discussing is sustainability and climate change. And we all know with the growing focus on environmental sustainability, architects and engineers are facing the challenge of designing structures and systems that minimize energy consumption, reduce carbon emissions, and adapt to the impacts of climate change. So this includes things like incorporating renewable energy sources, optimizing building materials for energy efficiency, and designing resilient infrastructure to withstand extreme weather events. So I'd like to hear from Krigh first. What are the big challenges and any solutions that you might have when it comes to the growing client demand for designs that focus in on sustainability?
I think from our perspective, it was interesting hearing Jeff from Elliston this morning say that there's two big drivers that are hitting our industry, which in the coming years, which is sustainability and digital, and how really they're partnered up together. And when we look out and have conversations, there's a lot of projects that are trying to move ahead with sustainability, trying to sort of do that extra bit. But from our perspective, this really has to be driven from sort of the client demands and the owners and operators of projects, and there needs to be a driver sort of pushing behind them. And I'm curious to kind of hear or see from the audience, how many of you have heard the term ESG reporting coming up? A few of you? What we've seen is that this is going to come up more and more. Effectively, like within the United States, any publicly traded company is going to have to start to report how they're performing sustainably. And I think that this is sort of a key driver because you can't necessarily report what you can't measure. And so once you actually start to measure how buildings are performing through things like smart buildings, and they've been designed to be zero carbon, are they actually performing that way? What was the embodied carbon in that building when it was designed? Well, if all of these things have to start to be reported, it starts to put pressure within people as they procure new projects to actually need to design them more sustainably. On top of that, there's a whole feedback loop that happens because when people start to actually design and start to integrate these more intelligent systems, you have a way of actually measuring the operations of them. And we actually believe that this will be a big changer within the design side of things because we'll actually start to see a feedback loop where we can actually design a net zero building or a zero carbon building, and then we can actually see how that performs over the next 5 years and feed back that information into the design process to improve it as well.
Advancing on what Krigh saying, there's an importance there about information. And if we think that while we're designing, we're manipulating information to some extent. So as an architect, what's the data that is most pertinent at this moment to address climate change? So what do I need to know? Is it materiality? Is it carbon, the carbon values of the impact of what we're actually putting into our designs? And does it actually address the challenges faced with climate change today, yesterday, or tomorrow? And I pose the question like that because I see climate change as a kind of like a moving target right now. We're doing some internal learning through our Turner Fleischer Academy to bring awareness of climate change to our studio, and its definition itself has been changing throughout the course of the last couple of years going into the future. So how do we as architects function today to address issues of climate change, to future-proof what we've done to make it still pertinent as climate change is changing in the years to come? And then what can I do at the real grassroots level to actually affect my design to have a positive impact? And a lot of that for me comes down to a real good understanding of the data that is at my fingertips to manipulate when I go through the design process, that I can bring value and say, hey, I'm actually making a difference. Because if I'm making a difference as a designer, then that will help me to shepherd that betterment throughout the design process.
I think from my perspective, building upon what both Krigh and Brent just mentioned, from our client standpoint, particularly on the design side, we're seeing with these increasingly strict energy codes and building codes, our clients aren't necessarily always in touch with those changes, and they want a full glass building, and trying to tell them that's not realistic anymore. It's not feasible. You're not going to meet code anymore now or tomorrow. Certainly not tomorrow. Probably not even today. So that's one a bit of a challenge that we as a firm we've always adopted and have been, we'd like to think, innovators in sustainability and resiliency and performative design. So we, way back in the day, would always treat every project as if it were to be LEED certifiable, as an example. You know, even if the client didn't want that, we approached every project that way and went through the same workflow for every project. And those characteristics carry forward in every project we do to this day. Specialists aside, you know, we have all of our sustainable design specialists are now getting subtitles for like resiliency and life cycle analysis, and so it's getting more and more complicated. But one thing I wanted to touch on a little bit that we're doing as you know, not just a challenge, but an opportunity that we're seeing is a lot of the reporting that we do as a firm as to how our projects are performing with predictive energy results and all the other usual things. It's just material tracking. Something pretty basic, and there's nothing magical with what we're doing, but I think it's a pretty smart idea. We've created this essentially an interactive project execution portal, which is for a different conversation. But part of that, the benefit of this thing is like it's this standardized set of tools they're really like mini databases for every project. And it's one place where we're tracking all of the materials with all of their sustainable characteristics. And because everything is standardized and everybody, you know, it's easy to use and it's all in one place, it's inviting and the teams are all filling them out. And now we're able to skim across all the projects and kind of get at a glance at any moment how we're doing at a material level across all of our projects. Really interesting work. And it's really not that, like I said, it's not directly connected to the model, not extracting data from it, but just a real good centralized and standardized way to manage all that information.
Yeah, and again, some of the things that NORR architects and engineers are involved with, and I'm sure, you know, DIALOG and Turner Fleischer HOK are doing the same things, and maybe even just hear a little bit about them, as the 2030 challenge, obviously from AIA, Net Zero challenge, Positive Planet, just speaking to the ESG reporting, and measuring of building performance. The further, like, we want to take this one step further in terms of an outreach to our client base and helping them with their green standards of their campuses. As an example, you know, York University is going through one program where they'd like their complete campus standardized through green building standards. And so we're trying to help them not only understand their current, you know, composition, but also how to make that campus greener, how to, you know, kind of help them in future design growth. So it's definitely rewarding. There's a lot of people that, frankly, much smarter than I am that are going through that, you know, in our group. But you know, building clients that way, helping them to educate, you know, through that process, I think has been rewarding for us.
And I'll just add it's always so interesting to be listening to different industries, as the IP lawyer, to be listening to different industries when they are at a point of change where there's a lot of investment, frankly, happening in an area, coming up with new technologies, coming up with new ways of dealing with data. And my initial reaction is, well, what are you doing to protect it? And part of the conversation that we're going to be having today is, do we want to protect it? As the IP lawyer, I'm going to say yes, but I also understand the room I'm sitting in right now, and that there's a tremendous emphasis on collaboration and the potential there. So I'll just say it's important to keep in mind that some of these innovations that you are investing in that are going to potentially set the standard for the future are things that sometimes you can receive intellectual property rights for. So the second topic is digital transformation. The integration of digital technologies such as BIM, VR, artificial intelligence, it's really transforming the design and construction processes. Architects and engineers are going to need to adapt to these technologies, develop new skills, and find ways to leverage them to improve collaboration, also enhance visualizations, optimize project delivery, and streamline maintenance and operations. Things like effective communication, interdisciplinary teamwork, and integration of diverse perspectives are going to be absolutely critical. So again, Nibras, we'll have you start this one off. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic. Obviously, top of mind for all big design firms that have you know, major projects, a lot of liability at stake. We're disciplined companies, so architects and engineers naturally want to work together in our company, and we have the ability to facilitate that. So a lot of these design initiatives need to speak to that. The idea of us being, so advanced, I don't think is there. We're not there yet, that's for sure. I mean, that's kind of the the opportunity for us to be advancing a lot more and utilizing some of these tools. I think we really need to start with basics. Let's get our drawing sets coordinated. Let's get, the quality of our drawing packages, of our models, to a certain standard that we can, take it out into the field and not run into trouble, through contractors and through the build model. So starting from that perspective, automation, AI is a huge concept and a big word that I don't think we're anywhere near exploring it to that degree just yet. And I'm sure my colleagues will have some more to say about that. But from my perspective, on the operation side, on the business side, utilizing some of the data and some of the smart technology, some of the automation to help our drawings, frankly, get better and our models get better, I think is extremely important for today and for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think going back to what Brent said earlier about his firm, that their BIM is your primary platform. Same with us. Two things that I wanted to. This was a pretty good discussion when we were kind of debating this in our prep calls, and it could probably be the whole hour or 40 minutes. But two things, particularly from my perspective, challenges with digitization. One, digital twin is like and a lot of it comes down to the language, the terms, and expectations. So I think that's probably the key. The same way it was maybe 10, 15 years ago, oh, give us BIM. Okay, what does that mean? Now we're getting, oh, we want a digital twin. When we dig into that request and requirement, actually, yes, it's a requirement that, you will deliver a digital twin. It's ranged from a photorealistic rendering somebody thought was a digital twin.
Sure.
Like a game engine simulation for their customers to kind of experience. That was for one of our sports clients. To what I think probably most of us would equate a digital twin is, a digital representation of the building that can support operations and maintenance. So I think having the lack of that clear definition at the industry level is challenging. It's not, we can overcome it by dialogue with our clients, but we need to, it would be great if we could just be a little bit more verbose and say, I would like a three-dimensional representation of my building that I can do X, Y, Z with. Like that would be much easier to understand than give me a digital twin. Second thing, I was going back to Mike McGowan's talk from Hilti and the wrench time. I thought about that and I realized what's wrench time for a design firm? Wrench time is designing. I think a lot of some of our architects actually think that producing drawings, doing annotation is our product. I don't think so. I think for a design firm, designing an amazing experience, an amazing space, a sustainable space is our wrench time. And the 70% of the non-wrench time is annotation. It's creating documents, documenting the decisions that we've already made in our models and through our analysis. So we're not seeing a lot of that on the design side from certain companies that probably the software we're all using as our primary BIM tool. So I'm hoping that's coming in the pipeline soon because that's our 70% of the drudgery that we see as a major challenge for us right now.
We're agree with everything. We're on a exponential growth path when it comes to technology and digitization. So my challenge over the 20 years has been, BIM, we talked about it, digital twin, we talk about it. And I always want to just express the value. So I can't remember whose slide it was earlier that had the value on there. And often in my career, it's if I can explain the value of the item to the stakeholders, then there's the probability of success. So even with BIM, what's the value to an architecture firm if your model, your design bid build, it's just you're on the design side, your model, and okay, cool. But then I say, well, so then sit back and say, well, you author stuff, you coordinate stuff, and you review stuff. If BIM makes those three things better, you have value as an architect, as an engineer. So rationalizing it down to those fundamentals, and then once you have the value and the efficiencies made in what we have to do, all the other stuff is extra bonus. Now that bonus, I can take it, I can express it to my client, and we can actually see where it can lead us. And for us, that's what led directly down the path of a digital twin. So with digital twinning, I laugh when I hear people say, I have a Revit model, therefore I have a digital twin. And that's like such a loaded, I use the vendor name, I'm sorry. It can be a Bentley model, an ArchiCAD model, and it's just philosophically comical that it's actually taken that path. But so what we've done is we said, well, we got to put our money where our mouths are. Let's actually make a digital twin. So we've done this with our office studio where I have a facility manager that I can actually speak with. That's my end user. So what do I want to do with my digital twin? The facility manager has to define the use cases. What are the assets and what are the things that we spend time managing from a facilities perspective? When COVID started, our studio went under a major renovation, so we had a really awesome design model carried through to construction. Great, I've got this awesome digital record that came out of the BIM process. I don't have a digital twin. Now I started asking our facility manager, well, what do we need to do? And it's amazing when I said, tell me some of the first things, and he said, the bike lock box. And I said, the what? The who? You know, outside, I've got to go out there and I do all these things, and we have an inventory of fobs, and I've got these manuals. And I said, okay, intriguing. So I need a storage space for operational manuals. I need an inventory system for key fobs. None of that's in my Revit model. Then I went to the Revit model. Oh, the bike locker was actually in the wrong location. It was moved from the front to the back in construction. So I had a misrepresented digital asset. So we fixed the model, built the asset management inventory system, built the documentation system, started linking it up, and I said, great, all of that is awesome for that one singular component. Next. And we went item by item throughout the space. And amazingly, yeah, it's not walls and floors, a little bit of doors, but it's not the door you see in Revit. It's the closer, the hinge, oil for the hinges, stuff like that. So where's all the inventory items and where's all of the practices for these assets that we have to manage, and how do I bind it all together? And once I was able to connect all of those data streams based on the facility manager's use case, tie it through tandem, leveraging the model it's Revited, it's BIM 3 ACC'd, it's tied into the digital twin. I've now got this collection of information that brings viability to a digital twin. And all of that is based on value and use case. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And let's make it real, not philosophical or just a discussion point.
And it's funny, Brent, like the way you guys talked about it, because you guys were focused on creating, you know, as a design practice, but you were also the owner, therefore you understood the value of it. And I think that that's something that's missing out there, is that we're sort of, you know, it's funny how, you know, yes, we are at a building transformation event. Why? Because BIM, you kind of say it and everyone thinks, that was about 10 years ago. And like as a practice, we are 99% BIM on our projects. You know, we've been doing it, we adopted it. And that's, you know, started within architecture and engineering and sort of flowed through to construction and is now sort of reaching, you know, we've been talking to clients and owners and operators for years about it. But at the same time, there was sort of this, well, why do I want a Revit file? We use AutoCAD. Why do I need this? And I think now we're starting to unlock the fact that, okay, we understand the value of bringing data together and understanding this, you know, within their sort of operation side of things. And there's suddenly this, you know, people that have clued into, oh, we want a digital twin. And I think that there's a bit of marrying up in the fact that we have to understand that, okay, no, a BIM model is not necessarily a digital twin, but it's the foundation of it. And it's this foundation that we are now building on top of as the wave starts to come back. And we are finding that there are certain clients, you know, we are actually getting RFPs now where it actually does say, we want a digital twin, and they're actually understanding it. There's a lot out there that don't understand where it is, going back to a few of the other comments. But I think that we're getting there, and it's growing because we're, now being able to understand how this data within design can be leveraged later on. I do think that there's still a difficulty in necessarily, unlocking that data. I think within our organization, we are looking, truly the fundamentals to me about what digital transformation means. It means connecting your data. It means leveraging it together and being able to make relationships between things, being able to search across things. I think that within if we're talking about challenges that face design industry, how many firms out there, how many practices in design can search across all of their BIM models right now, or can search across all of their spec sets? There's still this the information is still very desperate. And I think that one of the biggest challenges that we're looking to solve right now is true digital transformation, which is bring that data together. Because there's other things like all this talk of AI, machine learning. Anybody that looks at that stuff, you have to have the data sets organized and be able to apply the machine learning to it so they can learn.
Yeah.
And if you can't get access to that, and I think some of these are challenges that we're facing because the platforms we're on don't necessarily make it easy, or where it's stored. I think there's a lot of challenges in that. But this is something that we have identified and we're making our way through.
And just to add, the challenge, like when you hear the AI, machine learning, BIM, digital twin, all of the words bring the fear or the misunderstanding, and then it ends up being a decline and doesn't get used. With the BIM process, I still ask the question, just why? What do you want done? So are you going to give me a rendering, a VR, an AR, a 3D print, a laser cut? I don't care. What do you need? Right? So that's why when I always look back to those uses, are you coordinating or are you reviewing? And are you coordinating, do you need auto clash detection? Do you want to just walk through the model and look? Are you reviewing? Do you need a physical manifestation to look at, massing, detailed? What value does it bring to your design process? Are you dangling it in front of the client? Do they even care? Or you want a VR experience, strap the client in the goggles, but the client hates that. He doesn't want to put them on. Then what are we doing, right? So ask the questions, what's the purpose? And that will actually lead to a resultant that brings value. And that's with all of this.
So one follow-up question, if I may, is it sounds like digital twin, one of the issues is that we don't have a clear definition. Without a clear definition, we to a certain extent, have some incoherence across the industry. What do you think you can get a unified definition? Is there merit? How would that happen? Not everyone needs to jump in on this, but if anyone has any thoughts, feel free to go.
If I can start?
Okay, go ahead.
I think I agree with you. Is that there's a lot of it's very muddy, especially because you will hear a lot of people refer to it. There's even technology vendors that will sit there and go, yes, we can produce a digital twin, and you're going, no, that's reality capture. Why did you change the name? You just did that last year. I think so that in some regards there's a lot of kind of digital twin washing, if that's a term. I personally, when I looked at the digital twin consortium, I think that they came up with a really good definition. And if you look at the tech companies and the companies that sort of back it and have become part of the group, I think that there's a lot of people that get on board with it as kind of a definition of, I'm not going to recite it, but effectively a representation of what's out in the real world, but with a connection to what's out in the real world. And I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that.
Yeah, I do twin washing. I mean, that's perfect. Because I remember back when the term BIM first came around, and everything that was even remotely 3D was kind of marketing themselves as BIM. And I think we know better now, hopefully. But yeah, I think that's the question is not necessarily the definition is out there, like you said, but it's getting folks to know what that definition is and point to it and essentially set it as a reference standard. I don't know if that's like to be put in a national BIM standard as a reference or an ISO standard. I'm not sure how it becomes like a standard that can't be disputed, but you're right.
Isn't it a value extraction as well? Like, what does the client want or need out of a digital twin? If they wanted to, use it in the operation of the building, then fantastic. That's what we should be striving to achieve. But if it's a matter of, just having it and really not taking advantage of the power of the digital twin, then it's probably something that they're not willing to pay for to start, and not going to use if they actually had it.
It's almost like a ChatGPT thing where you have to kind of get creative in terms of what you're asking it. That's what we want. We want to be the AI inside of that engine saying, just tell us what you want and we can get a better sense of what the answer should be.
And I think the critical piece is that connection to the functionality and the actual performance of the building. So if a client asks for digital twin, but it's really just a digitized record of what was built, it's a record. They're not doing anything with it. So in our case, it was, okay, I wanted all those manuals, the inventory and IoT sensoring and seating. So we're using it to impact and decision make how we operate certain aspects of our facility. And that's the dialogue with the digital. And we have the physical that benefits.
Yeah, so like you're saying, in that case, if you had that example and you had some serial numbers, some maintenance documentation that was linked to the model, but it was not tied to live monitoring,
then
that's
it's
an
just
FM deliverable.
Absolutely, it's just a digital record of what was built, and it's in the digital closet.
Semantics, but it helps us kind of plan how much effort has to go.
And I think that, when we've talked as a panel, I think a lot of us share this sort of common vision of it. It's the difficulties when you get out into sort of the wilder, just owners and operators. It's one of those terms that they will throw at you and sort of say, yes, can we get a digital twin? But it's kind of like when you really get down to it, it's about having those conversations of what you're trying to really achieve.
And not to divert the panel, but in my past, I used to work water, wastewater. So before we had BIM or digital twins, I would sit with operators at the front end of design. We would go through instrumentation diagrams. They would define how they're going to operate the facility, the diagram tied to the model, the diagram tied to the SCADA system. And they would say, I want to look at this, click this, affect this item, and get this output. And there was an entire operational story based on specific assets that they had to monitor, and that digital representation was what they would rely on when they're interacting with their screens. So those are great for industrial projects, heavy on spec-driven design, et cetera. You get into our world, I don't know what that means, but you get into the world of architecture-led designs, that rigor isn't there. And it's just a different way to approach.
So we've got about 8 minutes left for our final question. And for that, it's the legal and ethical challenges. Fun stuff. So with emerging technologies like AI, robotics, and autonomous systems, legal and ethical considerations are becoming increasingly important. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the lawyer in the room. Architects and engineers will need to navigate issues related to things like security, liability, and the impact of automation on jobs. And so there's a question of balancing technological advancements with existing legal frameworks and also ethical practices is going to be a challenge. So, Krigh, let's get your thoughts on that.
Okay. On the, there's so many different ways you can go with this. Because, on the AI side of things, we've started into those whole conversations of even on a very basic level for those of you who have looked at Midjourney, and it's like, okay, if it scoured the internet and has collected all of these different images from all these different architectural projects and is now based something, a conceptual image of a project, and you've now presented that to the client, but it's like, but whose design was that really? And it starts to bring in very sort of heavy conversations on that side of things, which I think our industry is going to slowly unfold, and especially because with some of these things, you don't know what it's sourced. You can see that it's got little watermarks on the images and stuff, so it obviously referenced an image that may have been intellectual property of somebody else, copywritten, that kind of thing. There's all sorts of challenges with that. The other side of things is, going back to my answer from the original one, we are in the process of getting access to data that we never thought we originally would have access to. When a client, through, like, for example, we've worked with an academic institution, opens up their building automation system for us to be able to get access to so that we can learn how our projects perform. You get into a whole other realm of data governance that our industry has not necessarily been thinking about up until now. And I think that it's very important for us to start addressing these things and starting to look at what are the rules of engagement in those data governance, and how we deal with it.
And to avoid the fears of, am I going to be negligent, liable, accountable, blah, blah, blah. Because valid fears, I've been hearing it about BIM for decades now. We need the lawyers and the professional associations to help. So right now, I think the professional associations will take a longer route. So I think the lawyers can help us with quite just simple on limited liability type agreements where we say, okay, look, we have a contract, we're designers, we have to deliver A, B, and C. That's what we're bound by. We know we're in this world of data sharing. Can we make some understanding across us, our partners, so our supply chain, our contractors, our owner, that we're going to be sharing this information, but we'll all be professionally liable for what we have to according to our associations, and have the sharing economy going laterally across us all. That will kind of get us rocking until we hit the point where government, federal, provincial, and all of the associations under the provinces will build the comfort level with the modes of engagement for all of our professional associations.
Yeah, not necessarily. Well, maybe it does relate to liability. One term that I've been seeing, I gave it a term for a phenomenon that we're seeing lately: weaponization of clash detection.
Nice.
We're seeing this quite a bit now, where we would share models. And remember what I said before about the documentation and the wrench time. Our contracts still say we need to deliver a documents, drawings, specs. That's how we have to get our permits. Still, it's a project I'm piloting with the New York Building Congress, but again, for a different time. You can see me afterwards about that. But what do I mean by weaponization of clash detection? Well, we need your models, please. Okay, fine. We have disclaimer because typically it's not a deliverable, but we're being courteous. We like to be collaborative. What happens? They clash everything against everything, hit print.
Yep.
Everybody know what I'm talking about? A lot of false positives in that without kind of understanding how we use the model and the rules and filters we put in place. And then, clearly their model isn't perfect. It should be zero clashes, delay claim. That's happened quite a few times with us lately. So how do you balance what we're doing and what our contracted deliverables are with what the tools that we're doing behind the scenes versus trying to be collaborative? And I think that contracts will have a lot to do with that. Even just asking questions and trying to get involved early with the contracting side is key. We're seeing we're doing a lot more design build work in the past couple of years. One thing that's a little bit of a shock to that, it's great if you start from the beginning. We're seeing this novation process. I don't know if that's a term used a lot outside of maybe North America. I've seen it used in Europe a little bit, where basically we start out working for the client, and then somewhere in around like DD, maybe the beginning of CD, you're novated to a contractor. And now it becomes design. Now the contractor is your client. And they come in and say, well, all right, change everything. Here's our set of requirements. And for us, we're almost at the end. And it's really almost impossible to kind of completely change how you're doing midstream. So, we're nervous but excited to overcome that challenge. But we've always been historically very collaborative and very open in sharing. Like back to your intellectual property thing, like for us, we don't see it. I see a lot of people, I think that if they put work into it, they consider it intellectual property. For us, unless it's something that is proprietary to our designs, we don't see it as IP. Like for example, we built a whole system that manages and does like health checks on Revit models. And we put that, it's open source code. We put a ton of effort into that, but we don't see that as a differentiator. So we'd rather see the industry benefit from that. And we're not gonna say, hire us because our models are more efficient. Like that you're never gonna win a project like that.
Nope.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. I mean, where does the liability fall when things go wrong? I mean, it's always going to fall back to the stamping architects and engineers, unfortunately, in our business. And insurance rates are entirely too high at this point. So it's been difficult. I think it falls back internally with quality of our workflow, quality control, quality checks, rules of engagement. I think, the mid-journey concept and ChatGPT, again, to me, it replaces kind of a blank sheet. We're always going to be looking at precedents, whether it's in the physical space or in the metaverse. But quality drawings, our own proprietary design and designers are going to take precedence, and making sure that we have a process that limits our liability to a largest degree and keeps us out of trouble, I think is our primary goal, as well as producing beautiful buildings.
And we've got about 15 seconds left, but I will just finish on one note. I would say that I love how collaborative this industry is, and that there is tremendous, like we're seeing in so many, like with ChatGPT, by sharing this information and data, you're going to move forward faster. There is, though, a certain degree of, because you might feel you yourself do not want to protect your IP, that doesn't mean that the IP isn't there. And that it doesn't mean that someone can still seek to enforce their rights. So it's something that I encourage people in this space to know what the rights are and then say, fine, I want to make it open source. But it needs to be something that you reflect on. It needs to be an informed decision as opposed to getting sort of caught up with this. And again, fantastic atmosphere of collaboration, but there is liability there. And unfortunately, we really do not have time to get into the legal side of it more, but I'm sure there will be future building transformation talks on that topic. So thank you everyone very much. That was a fantastic discussion. And I think we have to wrap it up. No time for questions. I'm looking at the back to see like a cut sign or something. Cut. Okay, we are off. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.